This interview contains the same questions that we've asked all the other women. We're kind of trying to gather the same amount of information with the same questions. The transcription will be put in place in the Kansas State Historical Society archives. So you'll go down in history, I guess. First, I'm going to ask you some questions about your political career, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about you and your life, sort of more personal. You were appointed this year to serve in the Kansas House, is that right? What exact month? And
there was a resignation by Donna Whiteman, who was appointed Secretary of SRS, and then at that time the vote went to precinct chairman in Reno County in the district that I'm in, which is predominantly downtown Hutchinson and part of South Hutch. At that point there's an election among precinct chairmen, and then the name is sent to the governor, whose only option is to approve or ignore. So,
what month was that? I was trying to
August 27th.
August 27th, okay.
Of 92.
So you're one of the two new women in the legislature this
That's correct.
session.
Yeah, Ruby Gilbert was elected, and then I guess you're not actually appointed, but chosen to serve in December, I believe.
Now, when were you sworn in then, actually, the first day of the session?
No, I was sworn in, I think, August 30th.
Oh, that's right after you were appointed, okay.
I was sworn in on the Sunday following the 27th of August.
So you actually served on some interim?
No, I came in too late for an interim committee, but I was officially the representative for that district. I was sworn in by a woman district judge in Hutchinson, Vicki Kumarowski.
Okay, very good. It's a little different than most people have. And you're a Democrat? And how long have you been a Democrat, and why, and when did you first register to be a Democrat?
Well, as I can recall, I'm not sure if I actually had a party affiliation before I moved to Hutchinson in '76, and then at that time when I registered to vote in Hutchinson, I registered Democrat. Before that, I had been able to vote. Prior to that time, was registered in Rice County, but I'm not sure if I was an independent or a Republican. So
Why did you become a Democrat?
Actually, someone I knew I wanted to vote for in a primary, so it was pretty much a local election decision at that time, and then I've been comfortable with the party.
Oh, good. Can you describe your appointment? How were you selected, and how did you make it the decision to be one of the candidates for the vacant office?
Well, I was aware, of course, there was a vacancy when Donna announced that she was resigning and was being appointed, and I really didn't consider it too much. I'd had some people contact me informally and suggest I might be interested, and then about a week before the formal vote by the precinct chairman, I decided I would, after discussing with my husband, decided I was sincerely interested in it, and I contacted precinct chairman, and then at that point.
So you did a little campaigning among the precinct.
I contacted every precinct chairman or chairwoman. I got a hold of everyone and talked with them personally, predominantly by phone. And I believe the other candidate hadn't actually talked with everyone.
Was it a close vote, or were you?
Yeah, I think it was a fairly close vote. It wasn't a tiebreaker or anything, but it was a fairly small group of people and fairly close. I like the woman that had her name in also. It wasn't a contest between she and I. It was a contest for the position. So,
well, what made you decide to try to obtain this position?
I've always been interested in politics, and in fact, 20 years ago exactly in January, I was here for a month with an interim class from Sterling College in Sterling, Kansas, and I remember sitting on the floor the first day and thinking that had been sitting up in the balcony 20 years before when they had the opening session, and that was a class on legislative process, and I've always been interested. I think at that time, I assumed that's probably how I would get into politics if I did, by running for a House seat sometime. So,
well, who encouraged you to do this? You mentioned your husband.
Yeah, he was very enthused about it, and then, like I said, I got in contact from some people that in the community that thought I would be suited for the position.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, you didn't really campaign for this, and You haven't done that yet, but
Yeah.
oh, you have.
Yeah, we're in an elected district judge position. I defeated an incumbent and then got defeated 4 years later as an incumbent.
Oh.
So I've run 2 campaigns.
Oh, I see.
So.
Well, now explain that a little bit better.
Kansas has a local option
Uh-huh.
decision by judicial district, and it's almost half and half anymore. Half of I think it's 17 judicial districts have nonpartisan selection, 16 have election.
Oh.
And so we run on a political party basis.
In your county?
In our county, and so in 1984, I'd been in the prosecutor's office. I was an assistant county attorney, and I ran against a then incumbent judge.
I see. Well, that's interesting.
And our judicial district is same size as most, around 60,000, but it happens to cover our county.
I see.
So I did countywide.
So you had campaign. Well, that's
right.
An unusual situation.
And
well,
so
how did you
4
campaign
years later?
then? Oh, well, go ahead.
4 years later, then I was campaigned against in effect because I was an incumbent and was defeated in a fairly close race. So.
Who defeated you?
Her name is Patricia Mackey-Dick.
So it was a woman that defeated you.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I think it caused a little confusion among the voters. We both are...
Patricia? Her name was
Mackey-Dick, and she did originally hyphenated it, and I believe she then removed the hyphen during the time she was running for office. So.
Well, how did you campaign for that election?
Well, initially, the one I defeated an incumbent, I did a lot of door-to-door. And that's pretty much standard in Reno County. Almost every position you have there is a lot of door-to-door. We are, by local city ordinance, we're not allowed to use yard signs.
Oh.
Which is nice in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Then it produces a lot more need for other types of advertising.
Did you use the media in any way? Did you advertise or?
Yeah. My first campaign, especially, I did quite a bit of, not a lot, but I did radio advertising.
How much money is involved in a campaign like that?
Well, normally there's quite a bit involved. Both times I ran very little.
Oh, really?
My first campaign, I think it was under $2,000.
Well, now, how did you raise that? Did you have to raise funds?
I had a few contributions, but most of them were like $50 or $25. I used my own funding. Second time I ran for office as a seated judge, I took the decision of not accepting any contributions, so I financed my whole campaign. So
I suppose that would be different for a judge.
Yeah, and at the time the first time when I ran, the first year, I would not accept any contributions from attorneys, and I really think that ought to be part of the law that you don't do that. But my second campaign, there were too many people that I knew could potentially appear in front of me, so I just didn't accept any contributions to avoid any appearance.
Did anyone, I can't, since I haven't lived in the county where the media does this, do they endorse candidates?
In fact, the Hutchinson News endorsed my opponent that I got defeated.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and she had also been their attorney, but
that's interesting.
Probably just a coincidence. So.
Did you have any, either you or your husband have anyone in the House or Senate prior to your being elected?
You mean relatives or friends?
Friends or relatives?
No, I had known Donna Whiteman pretty well. She's an attorney, and I'd practiced on cases with her. Mike O'Neill, of course, I also know the same reason. He's an attorney in Hutchinson. In fact, Mike O'Neill and I were in the same class in law school at KU.
Oh.
I knew Jess Harder. I knew all our area representatives, but no relatives or anything.
You've told me a little bit about your district. What are the interests of the people there, and how are they involved? What kind of occupations and so forth?
Like I say, right now, there's my district. I'm losing South Hutchin. Unfortunately, I like the Hutchinson district also, of course, and I'm sure the precincts I get, I will obviously like the people in them. But South Hutch is a different style community than Hutchinson. But that's going to be under the reapportionment that's being moved out to another district. Hutchinson, the area I have, is the largest area with any minority population. I have almost 20% blacks in my district, and that's really, basically that's the black population in Hutch. There's very few That would be the only areas that you could say there's a somewhat concentrated neighborhood of blacks.
So you have kind of a diverse group of...
Yeah, and I'd say predominantly I have people that are middle class or lower middle class working class individuals. Our Hutchinson has the wealthier sections of town or to the north of the town, and that's in another district.
I see. Well, what kind of issues are these people interested in? You haven't been there too long, but you probably have a good idea since you've lived there.
I think there's a lot of concern. I'm on the labor committee. There's quite a bit of concern about some of the new workman comp bills that we're considering. It's an interesting district in that the business community during the day is in my district, but at night most of the business owners live in the north side of town.
Oh, my goodness.
So I have a constituency during the daytime that has most of the businesses, and you know, of course, the courthouse and the city hall and everything are still in the downtown area. But most of those people actually vote in a different district.
Well, that's interesting.
It makes an interesting mix because there's a lot of downtown issues, business issues that everybody's very concerned with, but at the same time, like I say, they're actually voting in another district. So I guess that occurs sometimes when you split the towns, but
well, I think that's the first time I've really heard
it's a
anyone
little
think
more
about
dramatic
that or
maybe in
explain
Hutchinson.
that. Yeah, what might be.
I have quite a few, a fairly large population of elderly persons in my district. We have a lot of the older housing where someone's grown up in a house or that was the house they were married and lived in. One thing, though, that then happens is once they need assisted care, independent living with someone available to help, they then move into the north side of town. So,
well, that makes maybe more of the same type of people for you to represent then.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting diversity. But I'd say predominantly our average income, I'm sure, on the side of town I represent is a lot lower than the other side, and that's sometimes coming out in discussions like, for example, the city commission, they've talked about whether they should have that in districts to ensure representation, because a lot of times there's no representation south of 17th.
Oh, on the city commissioner council or whatever.
Yeah, which, and that's not hard and fast because there actually have been people, and probably, I think there's probably at least one person that's currently from that area, but predominantly you get the other end of town and city.
That is unusual. Well, what issues are you working on this session?
I've been involved in a number of issues on the Judiciary Committee, and for example, I'm one of the co-sponsors of the drive-by shooting bill that would create a felony level offense if someone just shot into a house, even if they just broke a window or something. You know, otherwise it's just a misdemeanor now, unless someone actually sees someone shooting at them. It doesn't come up to anything more than a misdemeanor. Kind of amazing, isn't it? And I'm involved in some other bills like that. Judiciary has really been a good committee, and I've enjoyed it. So.
Well, some of the issues people identify as women's issues. Are you involved with any of these, or do you dislike or like the way that some people designate these issues as women's issues?
Yeah, I'm as a former prosecutor and a former my district court responsibilities included juvenile court. And I prosecuted in that area too. I've always been real interested in children's issues. And I know some people say those are the type of issues that can be called quote-unquote women's issues. I think probably being an attorney, I might have a little broader focus on certain issues. I've had a very diverse background as far as law practice. I've been director of the Legal Aid Society, and then I've been in private practice in prosecutor's office, and now as judge, and back in private practice again. I don't think I usually take a standard approach on a lot of issues, and I think I'm kind of hard to pigeonhole sometimes.
Well, that just brings me up to my next question. How would you classify yourself, or what kind of a label, if you could pin a label? I mean, I don't like labels, but if you were to call yourself conservative, liberal, how would you qualify yourself?
It's kind of, I think, again, I'm kind of hard to put in a category because some issues I will take what could be seen as a strong law and order position, as a former prosecutor. And yet there's some issues, for example, labor, pro-labor in a lot of ways, and that doesn't typically go with a conservative law and order stance. So,
you're
I kind of
an enigma.
Yeah. I think I grew up in a household. My parents both taught school, and an older brother who's very bright. And I think I just kind of grew up with the family. We traveled a lot in the summer, camping trips and such. And I think my parents just have always tried to encourage us to think for ourselves and look at issues from different angles. So I've kind of learned not to assume I'm going to be on one way or the other on a bill until I have a chance to look at it and kind of analyze it. So
that's an interesting analysis of yourself there. You're really a freshman.
Yes, I am.
Do you have a mentor or someone in the house that's kind of helped you along?
Well, there's been an awful lot of people who have been very helpful, and I think I had a good advantage coming in with I guess there's only 4 of us that are technically freshmen since last session. And last year I think there were almost 40 freshmen. So I think I've had an advantage because I can turn to almost anyone and they have more experience than I have. And people have been just extremely helpful. And that goes across party lines too. And I really appreciated the willingness of people to talk with me. And I think part of it is, as I say, due to the fact there was such a large class last year. People have gotten more used to dealing with newcomers, and the newcomers are glad to be considered experts by someone. So I can't say that there's anyone specific. I'm sitting on the floor next to Jack Wimpy, and he's been very helpful. Jess Harder I'd known before, and Jess has been real helpful as far as giving me advice. Eloise Lynch, share the office with, she's been extremely helpful, filling me in on a lot of details. So.
You serve on the Judiciary Committee and what other committee?
I'm on Labor, and I'm on Transportation, and I'm on a Joint House and Senate Committee of Rules and Regs, and I'm on a committee. It's called Computers, Communication, and Technology. So I have
a lot of committees.
5 committee assignments.
My goodness, that seems like you may have a record there.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how all that happened, but I really have some good committee assignments. So.
Do you have any leadership positions?
No.
That's a little premature to ask that. What bills have you introduced or sponsored any bills yet?
Yeah, I've been co-sponsors on a number of bills. As far as actively sitting down and having input maybe on something, on how it was written, probably just predominantly the drive-by shooting bill. I've signed off on other bills and been involved on discussions, but not to the extent of sitting down.
You jumped in with both feet real quickly.
Yeah.
Have you participated or are you participating in any coalitions or informal groups or formal groups? I know the women had kind of a coalition. Do you meet with them or anything?
The times I have been notified on some type of meeting, that group or a similar group, I've had my computer committee meets at noon hour, and so that pretty well takes care of any meetings. Kathleen Sebelius is running a first-timers group, and she in fact meets informally with the 3 of us that are Democrats that are the newest, and then we also meet with the first-timers from last, first termers, I should say. They're in their second session, but still their first term. And so she has a group that we can just sit down with her and ask all the dumb questions we want, and no one snickers. Yeah, she's done it.
How many did you say are in that group?
Well, there's 3 of us that are Democrats that are new, Bob Grant and Ruby Gilbert. And then there's also a group from last year, so you're probably talking close to 40 that are, they're first termers.
Oh, I see. So
I finally got this straightened out. The term is 2 years and the session is the individual. So now I'm getting the terminology down.
Well, now, you haven't had much chance to do this, but do you have any particularly vivid memories of the worst defeat or the greatest victory or the most embarrassing moment or anything like
that? Since I've been up here?
Since you've been here.
Well, I think it was kind of a positive experience, but I carried a bill on the floor of the House that came out of Transportation Committee, and it was to add provisions for pickups and vans in the child restraint law. And started out initially, everyone thought it was going to be pretty low-key, and it's been on the House floor twice now and had amendments added. So that was kind of a good experience. When you carry the bill, you're the one that stands up there and gives summation and responds to questions. And I had committee support, which was helpful, but that was kind of it's a good experience to have out of the way early.
Yes. Probably remember forever because it's your first one, too.
Yeah.
Now, let's see, there are 45 women in the House and Senate now, so that's, you haven't had any experience with any lesser number than that. How effective do you believe women are as legislators?
I think they're pretty effective. I went to law school. I graduated in '76 from University of Kansas, and that was an era when women were just beginning to go to law school.
Right on the edge of
we
that.
had 20%, around 20% in our class, and that was the largest percentage they'd ever had. And so this is a mix I'm pretty comfortable with, as far as some people say, don't you feel odd?
27%.
Yeah, you know, not having more women, but this is a pretty comfortable.
You're used to this.
I don't want to say comfortable so much, but I'm used to this type of mix. And for example, on transportation, I'm the only woman, and they kid me about being the token woman on the committee and such. But you know, I found being an attorney for a long time, I would go to Bar Association meetings and such, and there would just be a few women there, or the district judge position even more so. And so that kind of feels like a normal mix in a way. So I'm used to that.
How many women judges are there across the state?
Oh, there's quite a few. There's going to be more. At the time I went on the bench, there were just a few of us that were district judges.
But it's growing in numbers.
There were quite a few that were magistrate, which is a non-law trained, or wouldn't have to be law trained. Now there's a larger number. Reno County has 2 out of 4 judges now in our judicial district.
Reno County is
pretty progressive in a lot of ways. So.
That's what we're kind of finding. There's sort of areas where there are more women.
Yeah, because, you know, people say to me, do you still like election of judges since you've been beaten? I said, sure, you know.
Do you really?
Oh, yeah.
Let me see here. Okay, we have found that, and since you were involved in kind of on the political scene, even though it was more judicial than political, in the 70s, I think I want to ask you this question too. We found that in 1974 something happened. Prior to that year, there had never been more than 4 or 5 women, well, never more than 4 in the Kansas House and Senate. In that year, they doubled that number, well, even more so than that. And ever since that year, it's been growing, the number of women. Now, you ran, what, in 76, you said?
No, I got out of law school in 76.
Oh, that's right, okay.
84 is when I...
Well, still, you were involved in that. Can you think of any reason?
Any turnaround for that? Well, I just think women were becoming more active in a lot of professions, and I suppose that would apply to politics as well. You know, like I say, the law school, our class started, we graduated in 76, so we started in 73, and, you know, the year after us was a big upsurge in the number of women.
That's what we noticed in other
things. You know, I think perhaps it was just a period of women maybe had, I suppose our ages were such that we'd probably grown up with a generation of parents that weren't trying to say, be a teacher or do this if you don't want to. You know, like my parents, I would have been very happy as a teacher and probably would have done it, but I was in political science and I knew I couldn't coach football. And that was frankly, you know, what was going on in the high schools at that time. So I think I would have enjoyed being a teacher, but, you know, it's a situation I remember. I just went to law school kind of on a fluke. So,
really?
Yeah, but my parents thought that was great. You know, they've always been very encouraging. But whatever type of profession. But I think maybe a lot of us at that age had parents, maybe our parents had changed after World War II. You know, we were the generation where most of our dads had been in World War II. You know, the mothers had to take on different responsibilities while they were gone.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an impact on that
sure
change.
Could have been.
Because that's all I could think of as far as a trend, but it seemed to hit about that same.
Well, Linda Everhart appeared on a program with Dr. Tucker and I, and she mentioned this. We hadn't talked to each other prior to that, but she brought up 74, and then we got up there, and she said that would seem to be the turning point for admission of women to law school, and we thought, well, it happened there too. There's something.
Yeah, that's interesting. So,
well, we're asking people.
Well, and you see, I actually would have been in a class a year. I skipped it. I got out of high school a year early. So,
oh, you did.
So I actually would have been, you know, back another would have been part
let's
of
back
that
up.
class.
You went to Sterling?
I went to Alden High School,
Uh-huh.
which is no more due to consolidation, and then I went to Sterling College
Uh-huh.
and graduated from there in '73. And
With
then
a
I went
major in political science.
Uh-huh. And then I went to law school at KU.
I see, right after.
Directly. I started law school when I was 20, so.
Uh-huh. Oh my goodness.
So.
You were fairly young then, probably.
Yeah.
As far as your class goes. Okay, well, are you a native Kansan? I'm going to ask you some questions about yourself.
I am. I was born in Hugoton, but my parents were living in Satana. My dad was a teacher in that school system, but Alden in Rice County is Washburn family home. My folks live in the home that my mom grew up in.
Oh.
And so I grew up in that home too.
I see.
And it had been a matter when my folks had taught in different areas. They'd live someplace during the winter and come back to the family home, and then eventually they ended up teaching in that area. My dad in Sterling, my mother in Alden. So,
what does your father teach?
He's retired now, but he taught biology and earth science. And he writes.
Oh, he writes.
Yeah, and historical and nature columns and such. My mom was a grade school teacher.
What are their names?
Paul Long and Lois Long. My dad's done quite a bit of writing for Kansas Steak and some of the other.
Okay, I've probably read that.
Yeah, you may have seen. Yeah, so. And then I have an older brother, and he also taught, got his master's. He went to Sterling College, a master's degree at K-State in electronic music.
Electronic music.
And he taught school for a number of years, music, of course, and now he writes for a living. And my sister-in-law is an English teacher.
Huh. Well,
and teaches in
you have a lot of teachers around you.
I'm kind of the failure in the family. I didn't make it into teaching. Yeah, my grandfather had even taught, so.
But you talked about this family farm. Is that where you grew up then?
Family home.
It's just, it's not out in the country.
It's in the city, or a village perhaps would be a better term. There's about 200 people in all, 250. Yeah.
I see. Well, is that where you grew up then? What kind of things did you do while you were growing up? Did you participate in any activities?
Yeah, sports. Played tennis. I was on the tennis team in college. Very active in music. We had a folk rock group. My brother wrote music, of course, and we performed. It was the era of coffee houses and such, so we performed, and I sang and played keyboards. Had a synthesizer, the first synthesizer in our area. All that thing. Been active in that. Our family's always been pretty active in church activities and such. I read a lot.
Were you in debate in high school, perhaps?
Well, I did take some speech classes. I remember, though, when I started at Sterling College, I was so terrified to speak in public. I just remember the first time I had to talk in front of a class of about 10 or 15 people, I thought I would die. I thought I'll never get a job ever where I have to speak in public. And I have continually gone against the grain for all these years. I had a real severe speech impediment as a child and had speech therapy for a number of years, and I get kidded sometimes. People can't place my accent. I've decided it's because my speech therapist was originally from the East Coast, and so, so I picked up a little, yeah, I don't think many of us have much of a Kansas twang here anyway, but I certainly don't have as much as some people do.
Oh, that's interesting.
So,
well, did you belong to any other organizations after you got out of high school, or any social organizations or anything?
Not really. Since I went to college and went straight, I participated in honor societies and stuff. And
professional organizations.
Yeah, professional organizations.
Really?
I'm a member of a club called Altrusa now, which is a woman's social.
Oh, okay.
You're familiar with the Altrusa?
Yes, and we're kind of looking to see if women are belonging to any of these organizations that may have given them some impetus to run, or trained them in using some skills, or just alerted them about some of the issues.
Yeah, I joined Altrusa in '84. We have a really good club in Hutchinson. We have about 60, almost 70 members. And it's been established in Hutchinson since 1927.
Does it go on any national?
Yeah, it's an international organization now. I think there's about 18,000 nationally. Altrusa is altruism, but it's USA then. So Altrusa. Yeah. So, but it predominantly we support literary projects, things like that.
Now you said you were 20 when you went into law school. How old were you when you were appointed to this office?
I'm 39 now.
You're 39.
So I would have been.
That was an average age for people.
Yeah. So 39 now, and my birthday was in September, so I was 38 when I was.
Okay.
So.
Now, do you have children?
No. I've only been married for. Got married in September of '90, so it's my first time and my husband's first time. I guess you could still have children, but I didn't.
Oh, who knows?
Yeah, anymore you have to say.
Okay, now you're living in Topeka during the week. Do you go home on weekends?
Yes, I do. I've been home. I'm not going to be able to go home this weekend because we're having the Washington birthday.
Now, what does your husband do?
He works for Santa Fe Railroad. He's a conductor.
Do you get to see him very much?
Right now he's been on the reserve board with Santa Fe, so he's been up at least a few days every week, which has been real nice. Yeah. He's a graduate of Wichita State in engineering, but he worked his way through college working for Santa Fe, and then has pretty well stuck with him. So.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you think made you want to be in the legislature? Can you think of something or someone or an event?
Like I said, clear back when I was in college, I was always been interested in politics. But I think also when I'm practicing as an attorney or prosecutor, judge, whatever, I've always seen certain laws that I have been curious as to how they could have arrived.
Now you know.
in the form they are in, and there's some laws I felt were pretty unnecessary, and some laws I thought were probably needed that I haven't seen. So I guess I decided, it was not unlike when I decided to run for judge. At the time I ran for judge, the gentleman who was judge, while a very nice person, I didn't think was handling the juvenile court as it should be handled. And so I thought my philosophy then was, instead of standing around complaining, I'm going to make a decision and run and try to change the system. And I guess that's the same thing here. I thought, instead of complaining about problems I've seen through the legislature, that I should at least run for it and see a little more how the process works and see if I can have any kind of impact, no matter how small.
Yeah. Well, so that would be, my next question is, how do you think that your service in the legislature will serve the state?
I guess in some ways my training and background, I'm a real detailed person on certain things, and I think already I've been in fact, the chairman of the judiciary told me this the other day, that he felt like I've been a good aide, and that I actually am reading the bills and analyzing certain language, because I've seen so many problems in court with loosely written language. So I think it's good to have some detailed persons. You can have a whole group of us, or we would totally paralyze the process. But at least on some things. And then I guess I'm kind of focused on, there's certain issues that we've talked about really in passing that I think are important, some of the children's issues and such. So I think, having been a prosecutor and kind of on the front line, have an impact on some of those decisions.
Well, do you think that this is a big sacrifice to you and your husband for you to be down here, or what do you feel like you've given up or sacrificed?
Yeah, well, it's a financial sacrifice in a lot of ways. I pretty well closed down my law practice before I came up. I just referred cases out, and since I was a sole practitioner, that's obviously you don't get income from cases you refer out. But that was part of the discussion my husband and I had before I decided to run. I think also I've always been very aware of conflict of interest. As I say, when I ran my campaigns, didn't feel like I should accept certain donations or any donations in the second campaign. And because of that, I felt as an attorney you have to be very careful not to have your practice feed off your position in the legislature too much, just to avoid the appearance of impropriety, I think.
What are you going to do when you decide to retire from the legislature, will you go back in there?
I'm sure I'll go back into private practice. So I'm well known in the Hutchinson area, and I don't think I'll have any problem picking up clientele again.
Do you think being in the legislature has changed the way other people see you and treat you? And
I've been interested in it. I think some people consider it a lot more status position than perhaps being judge, which I guess when you're trained as a lawyer, you see the judge as kind of the ultimate.
Interesting, really.
And if you look at salary levels or immediate personal power, there's a lot more as judge.
Yes.
However, I think your impact's a lot greater statewide in this type of position. But that's been interesting to me.
That is
that most people, everybody who has talked to me about it has said, boy, this is really a step up. So that's been interesting.
Well, that is.
Uh-huh.
Well, how do you think the experience is changing you? I mean, do you think it's having an effect on you being here? How do you see yourself changing?
I'm enjoying the position because there's a lot of camaraderie as a judge. I always thought a good judge needs to be pretty well isolated from the bar, except in fairly formal situations. And it's nice to be part of a group.
I see.
Again, I'm enjoying that part of it. You may not always agree with someone on legislative matters, but you can be talking to them and discussing decisions, which you really can as a judge.
Oh, that's interesting.
So now some judges don't follow it that far and don't isolate themselves. They go on ski trips or out to eat or whatever with attorneys. But I guess as an attorney that always kind of bothered me when I saw that happening, so I didn't pursue that as judge.
Well, is there anything I haven't asked you about that you would like to share with us in this interview?
I can't think of anything particularly. I think we did it faster than what you anticipated.
We sure did.
I don't know,
you're one of these very precise people.
Fast or
no, I think you summed it up real quickly. Yeah.
No, I think it's an excellent way for anyone who wants to serve their community to get involved, and I think the best thing in the legislature is people that don't have individual causes or access to crime, but are trying to serve a larger group of people. And there's a lot of issues, like I say, I consider important, but I don't think I have any personal stake, except in the sense that everyone has to have a certain, it's your job, so you obviously have a personal stake, and obviously we all have some ego involved, or we wouldn't have nerve to be up here. But I think otherwise, I can't. There's not one group of issues I came up that I wanted to be sure I got done. And that's one thing I've noticed is that it costs $607, they said, to introduce a bill, and that's an average bill, just the printing cost. And then you get a bill that's 50 pages long occasionally. And what I've been struck by is I think sometimes people like to have their names before the public so much that they'll introduce 5 bills that are almost the same, and that way you can be co-sponsor on bill. But I think part of it is that what I'm hopeful is that we'll all move towards just trying to get our issues heard instead of necessarily getting our names on the pieces of paper. That $607 is a good figure to remember.
Oh, goodness. That amazes me, it really does. Well, what do you think has happened to women since '74 across the board? And you said that the occupational expectations might be different. What about the people that vote for them, though? That must be different. Because more people are electing, women, so more people are voting for them.
I think part of it, I noticed in my campaigns, part of the reason people vote for you is they maybe had professional contact with you.
Oh, really?
They've seen you as an attorney, or they saw you appear at a meeting and explain something, or whatever. And so I think as women become more visible in different occupations, Hutchinson's always had a number of women principals in the schools and such.
Well, maybe Hutchinson, I'm going to have to look into that.
It's a pretty progressive town. We had the first county commissioner that was a woman who was elected in Reno County. I was the first woman judge that was elected in that county. There'd been, I think I may have been the first woman. I'm not sure if there'd been other women judges elected on the district court statewide. There may not have been because we were on the election. But it's always been very progressive. Like I say, 2 out of 4 judges being female right now.
Right now. And how many other women are in the House districts around you that surround you there?
Well, there's Harvey County, Ellen.
Samuelson?
Yeah, Samuelson. You'd have to visualize her name.
Mm-hmm.
She's from Harvey, which is next. Donna Whiteman, of course, had the position I have. Then, of course, Sedgwick County had quite a few
Yeah,
women.
they do have. Well, now, we'd heard that there was a group in I guess it's in Wichita, that supported women candidates, or helped women candidates run campaigns, something like that.
Yeah, they may.
Do you know anything? You don't know anything?
No, there may well be, but I haven't heard specifically. And I don't know that there were any specific women groups, female groups or women's groups that I've been aware of in Hutchinson. I think
not the League of Women Voters or anything.
We don't even have a League of Women Voters there anymore. So
it's interesting.
Yeah, it eventually got into such a small group it didn't survive, I guess. But women are real active in Kiwanis and all kinds of clubs there. You know, JC's has had a lot of women presidents. And
well, that's unusual.
Oh, yeah. It's.
I mean, for the across the state anyway.
Yeah, it's a different style. I think the town is very progressive in a lot of ways about women's rights, and it's interesting because we have women in both political parties that are in positions.
Not just
Democrats, which you might assume are.
Well, it seems like it's
Republicans,
kind of that way, though.
So, yeah, I think Hutchinson in a lot of ways is pretty.
Well, I may have to come back and I'll look at this and maybe ask you some more questions.
Yeah, I'd be glad to.
If this turns out to be a
trend,
yeah.